Hi there, Mayflom here, and you're in my scrapbook. This is last year's scrapbook that I'm working on. And in this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about stamping on your photos and on your scrapbook pages. But first, if you've never started a scrapbook or if you're totally overwhelmed, if the pictures are on your phone, guys, there are apps you can use where you can directly order off of websites. You can download them onto your computer and then order them. You can do there's lots of different ways to get those pictures, whether they're on your phone or your camera. Get them off there, get them printed. So what I did here, and it took me a couple nights, but basically what I did was go through 2016. I went through and I just took all the pictures, I put them in order, okay, the order that I wanted them, and I just slapped them in. I just ordered 4x6s. I just went through and went, okay, this works, this works, this works, in order, and just went along as I went. So obviously I sorted them in order before I stuck them in. And then I started to go through my cards, and if I found cards that would work well for a certain area or a certain page, I went ahead and put those in. And if I did not find anything, I left it blank. Now this gives me some room to play around with how I want things to be organized. My only real rule here is I left one spot blank per 2-page spread minimum, okay? I always made sure there was at least one spot blank so that I could add some writing somewhere on here. So back to where we are right here. This is a camping page, and what I'm going to be working with, I'm going to be working with stamps from a company called Sweet Stamp Shop. They're really cute little stamps. Here's a little camper. This is still wet. It's drying. I'll talk to you about that in a second. So they make really cute stamps for anything. Here's my big thing with stamps, guys. If there is a stamp, it does not matter what it's for. You can use it for whatever you want. Card making, scrapbooking, planning, mixed media, you name it. You decide how you use that stamp. So here are my tips here for you. So first of all, I find if you're going to scrapbook a year or an event or something big, or you just want to get started, get yourself a manageable size. Manageable meaning not 10,000 photos, maybe a couple hundred at most. Get yourself your pictures, get them into your album in some order, or sort them maybe in a box where you sort them by page how you anticipate using them. Get that going. You don't have to work in order, but by having them down in some order, really makes it easier to then create, because you don't have to think about all the things. For example, because I've gone ahead and committed to pocket pages for last year, because I really did not scrapbook at all last year, because of the way I've done this, what I can now do is I can just come in here and say one little square at a time, one little rectangle at a time, one little spot. I'm going to do this one. Like the other day, I came in here and added the word Crescent City to this card. So now this page has a title, and now I'm doing this stamping, or I'm doing that stamping. So you can break it down into really small chunks. I don't have time is not an excuse here. You can have 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. In the time that you watch this video, you could have 2 or 3 little things done. So there's always time. It's just a matter of priorities and finding it and breaking it down into small chunks so you don't get overwhelmed just thinking about it. So what do I have here? This is a little trailer that I stamped and then colored, and then you can see there's some glossy there. I just put glossy over the color because those colors, those pens that I use are water reactive, and it's still a little tacky, so I'm not going to slide it in yet. But those colors I used are water reactive, so I just covered them over with the gloss to add some gloss and shine, but also it protects my scrapbook too, just in the sense that those colors are now locked. Those colors can't blend and bleed. They've been sealed in. And then just added a little journaling. This was just a card. It was blue on this side that I didn't see myself using, so I used the white side, and we'll tuck it right in. That one's going to go right in here. How can you stamp in your scrapbook? Well, here are my favorite ways. This is way number 1, and we'll make another card. Stamping onto a journaling card, creating your own journaling cards. You can just do it by putting a word, that's already on there, but you know, you could put a word, you could put an image, but just stamp one thing on there. Another way is to directly stamp onto your photos. Here, I've done that right here. It says fire, family, stars, laughing, taking time. I love this stamp, and it's a part of this stamp set that I've been showing you from Sweet Stamp Shop right there. So this one I stamped in white ink, then remembered with pigment ink You know, it takes some time to dry and set. And then I went, you know what? I sprinkled some white embossing powder over it and heat set it. When you heat set, and we'll do one in just a moment, when you heat set with your stamps on a photo, you just go real slow and careful because you don't want to burn things. So you can stamp right on to your pictures. If you're not feeling as risky, you can stamp onto, and I'll do it for this one, I can stamp onto cardstock and then cut the cardstock out and mount it onto a photo. What you're going to look for in your photos if you're wanting to stamp on them, couple things. A spot like this where it's all just the dark hill here, and if I put something over in this area, okay, you're not going to miss anything from the photo. The scenic part is really over here, and then we're here. Something there. Here's another example where there's like some grass and weeds and, well, not weeds, wild plants, whatever. So I could put something here or on part of the trees. It wouldn't take anything away. Down here, we got a similar situation where there's a lot of green, where stamping something small or adding stickers or some such would not be taking away from the look of that picture. And then over onto this page, we could probably over here where the patio area is, there's a couple spots that get smaller. When it's obviously the smaller picture, it gets smaller area. You can also, I'm saying stamp, you could also be putting words on here, whether you're directly writing with a pen or perhaps you're going to take some pen, write on cardstock, cut the cardstock out, put it on top. We can do that as well. So a couple of these pictures, you know, this one, it would be over our legs probably. This one maybe over here. You can kind of look around and see where does it fit, where would it work. And you don't feel like you need to do something with every photo. That's why I often recommend pocket page style scrapbooking to someone who's new to scrapbooking, because all you have to do is look at each pocket. You don't have to worry about overall page design. You don't have to stress yourself out with a lot of stuff. You can keep it really simple. And if you want to be even more simple, you know, there are companies, Sweet Stamp Shop being one of them. These guys make stickers of their stamps. So they're stamp designs, but they're stickers. So you could color them, peel them off, slap them on. That's another option. There are many, many options for us here, and we can always explore them. So let me show you 3 different ways I like to do it. Right now, I'm going to put this away and we're going to work off the page. That is something I do when I get the stamps and the inks out. I put the scrapbook away so that we can work on it and not worry about getting it dirty. Here is a second set from Sweet Stamp Shop, and this one's just so cute as well, with a little road and the mountains. I wanted this one because I want to put a sentiment down here on this little photo of the doggies. This is actually on the next page of the scrapbook. But like I was saying, you don't have to work in any given order. You work in whatever order you want, or if you see something and you're inspired, go with it. Don't worry about in order. You can always fill stuff in later. So I'm going to use archival ink because it is acid-free, permanent, and waterproof. You do not have to use archival ink. You can use dye ink, you can use pigment ink, you use whatever ink you're comfortable with. I'm using this because I happen to have a dark blue, and that's the color that I think would work really well here. And then see how I'm going to have to re-ink it probably. But with this clear block, I can just kind of look around at, you know, first I looked at it, where would it fit? Yes, it would. And then I can look at where exactly does it fit best. Now, if I take too long, all I have to do is just re-ink. Okay, and then when you press down, I'm going to talk to you about this after I actually stamp. So I'm pressing nice and firmly and then lifting. Now, what you are going to find, and I'm going to show you on a piece, let me see here. Here's a piece of blank paper. So what you're going to find when you go to stamp, you might notice I moved really slow and I rocked back and forth just a tiny, tiny bit versus just tapping down, and I'll tell you why. Because what I find is a lot of times with photos, when I try to directly just stamp down, one of 2 things can happen. The first thing that can happen is something like this where it's not even and I went too fast. The second thing that happens is photos are a little bit slick. And sometimes when you put the ink on the slick, it starts to, when you go to press, sometimes I find more of a slide. So I like to press, and it's very, very slight. What I like to do when I go to press down is just start at press to one side first. Just get a little point of contact first and then continue to stamp. If you have a really ugly photo, maybe a photo that came out blurry, you accidentally ordered, something like that, use it to test. Use it to learn and test. That's a great way to kind of break yourself into stamping, but not worry about if you've done it just right. No pressure. Get a little idea for it. And it really isn't hard. It's just one of those things that you want to be aware of and be careful with. So mine, I can see that the ink is still wet. So I'm going to just set this aside and let it dry. And everybody's got a little different way that they prefer for stamping. Everybody's going to have their preference. This person prefers it this way. This person prefers it that way. There's not necessarily a right or wrong. Go with what works and what makes sense to you. Because, I mean, some people are going to tell you, no, you have to be straight down versus the kind of angled stamping that I start on one side and then gently press. I find it helps me to hold the thing down in place better. Other people will tell you it does not. It's totally personal preference. So now again with archival ink is what I use, especially with black ink, unless I have a reason not to. And the reason I do that is because I find, well, archival ink is acid-free, permanent, waterproof ink. It's the best probably for scrapbooking. The other thing that I find with archival ink, of course, is that it does not react to water. So that means if I come in here with color, it's not going to have a reaction, which in some cases is quite important. And then I'm going to put just a little firefly. So this is going to be a journaling card, which means I'm going to add little bits of journaling on here. And I'm also just going to kind of add a few little touches here. I'm going to add that little guy. And then I'm going to add some stars, but I think the stars I'm actually going to make blue, which I know that sounds, I don't think I've seen blue stars, but I'm just going to add some little blue stars here, just for fun. And I'll add one down there. So I've got a couple of stars and I've got some decoration. This is it. That's set. Look, we can go right from there. Or if you want to add some color, you certainly can. I'm going to try with some clean color. We're going to see if this works out well or not. I'll be honest, it might not work out very well at all because this is not watercolor paper. And these particular markers really are more for watercolor use. So as I color this, I don't want to say it may turn out badly, and I don't really have a lighter color. So I'm going to go ahead with a water brush. If you don't have a water brush, a paintbrush and some water, same difference, will work. Okay, but the water brush just has water in the barrel. So I'm going to take that, and it's just barely wet. I don't want to make a lot of watery mess here and warp my paper or oversaturate my paper, because that's something to consider too. If you're really wanting to get heavier into technique, you're going to need to put this on watercolor paper. You're going to need to do something a little differently than just coloring on the random cardstock that the image happened to be on, because these papers, this kind of paper is meant for writing on. It's not meant for art mediums and color blending and all of that. So it's just one of those things that we can be aware of, but I can certainly add some more color here and play with it a little bit. I don't want to overwork it, that's for sure. And then I'll add a little color to my logs here. This can be a fun thing to just kind of, play around with. You don't have to worry too much about it. You could also do it later. You don't have to do it as you stamp it. You could do it at a later time. But I always do like to do this part before I add any words. And my reason for that is, if I'm doing this and I mess it all up, I'd rather know about it and, throw it away and move on before I've invested time in writing out my thoughts and what has happened. So that's another way, stamping for your journaling cards. A third way that we can do this, of course, is to stamp out key images and decorate. And I think of that in the case of, like, if we were to stamp one of these campers and color it really nice and then maybe die cut it or cut it out, and mount it somewhere onto our scrapbook page as you would a decorative sticker. So instead of thinking of some of these as stamps, we could think of them as stickers. And like our little fire here, that could easily have been a sticker. Okay, so by thinking of these things not as all different things, but what effect are we trying to achieve? Now the last thing I'm going to show you is I will show you embossing on a photo. Now here is stamping onto cardstock, which I could then grab my scissors or my paper trimmer or whatever it is that I want to have. I could then cut out. This would also be great if you were going to a crop or a retreat or something and you didn't want to have to bring all your stamps. You could stamp all your stamps in various colors on various papers, and not all your stamps, but you know, stamps that would be applicable for whatever project you're working on. Stamp them on paper, and then just bring the pieces of paper along, because we can, and it's pretty cool because look, it adds a little bit of texture, it adds a little bit of color. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to have little word or words, and remember this is stamped, but oh sorry, I had that way too high. But you can see it can be a lot of fun, but you can also add your handwritten journaling, computer journaling printed onto cardstock works well. There's a lot of little tips and tricks that you can get into, and I hope you'll stay tuned for more videos because I've got all kinds of scrapbooky tips and tricks videos coming your way. So what I am going to do is I'm going to use a white pigment ink pad, because what I find is when I want to stamp on a photo and I want to emboss with white, I really like to just use my white pigment ink pad, largely because guess what? I don't use it all that often. So I'm just going to very carefully stamp, and what I see already is I can see that a little too much got on there. So there's a little bit of ink that what I'm going to do is take a paintbrush in here and just gently, because this is going to, it will stay wet for a little bit, the pigment ink. So because I had a little too much ink on there and I was chattering and I wasn't double checking my work, guys, don't worry about it. We can just, and I'm using my finger, but you can use a paper towel, use something else. It's pretty forgiving as long as you're fairly quick about it. So I can just sit here, and I'm going to mist this with water because a little bit of water will help. And I can just sit here with this brush, make sure the tip stays really, really fine. And I can just go through and tidy it up. It shouldn't take very long. And it's nice to know that, you know, just a little bit of water, it's going to take a tiny bit of effort here, and I wish I had been paying attention more, that I had a little too much ink on my brush, but guess what? I already fixed it. You know, it's not that big a deal. And I always try to tell people, especially with this stuff, don't make it a bigger deal than it is. Can you fix it? You know what? Worst case scenario, guys, I could have put this over it, and that is actually my plan if when I do the embossing here it won't work well. So embossing powder, you put it on, there needs to be some kind of ink, either embossing ink, or in this case when I use the white pigment ink, that was a great choice for this because the pigment ink stays wet for a little bit and works well. And then you can see it wants to stick here, but don't worry, we want to get it back off and down into its container, because we do not want this to be out and loose and around while we do the rest of our stuff. Absolutely not, because if it is, boy, that can really make a mess. Okay, so off to the side over the garbage can, I just give it a little shake for any loose powder, and then what I will do is very gently just take my brush here, because there's just a little bit of like static cling. There's just a little bit of powder that's trying to stick around my word that I don't want. And if that happens, we just give it a little brush. No big deal. And I'm getting that little brush back out just to make sure that the letters each have definition and that there isn't any extra going on. And if there is, no big deal. We just fix it up just like this. And yes, this is a little bit tedious, but you know what? for some, it's really worth the effort sometimes, and I'd like to show you different ideas, whether they take a little more time or a little less time, because it's up to you, you know, if how much time investment you want to get into things, and your risk factor as well. I mean, obviously, if you stamp onto cardstock, there's no risk factor. There's a little bit. So then your heat tool, and no, it can't be a hair dryer, it can't be anything else, it has to be a heat tool. You might notice I'm just waving it at nothing right now. I'm letting it warm up for a minute. Instead of doing this onto the project while the air is getting hot, I'm letting it warm up a little bit, and then I'm going to go like so, and then off. And then I'm going to go like so, and off. You do not want to do this quickly. And the reason is, you have to be careful. The photo's going to bend a little bit as it is, but you have to be really careful that you're not overheating the picture. Even though you have to get this powder hot enough to melt, you do not want to get this picture so hot that bad things start to happen. And you'll know when it's going to melt because it turns glossy all of a sudden. And it's turning, so that's why I'm keeping it on now, because once it starts to turn, there we go. Now, there it is. Clearly says camp out. I can read it. I can see it just fine. If for any reason you were not happy with how that turned out, you have your backup. You can always do something like that and nobody would ever know. Me, I like the camp out, and what I want to do is actually repeat what we just did, this time with some little stars. And I'm going to add a couple little stars, and I'm going to be very, very careful that I don't overdo this. And you want to be really careful to press, be kind of still here. It's going to want to squirm around on you. It's kind of a pain. That is part of the pain of stamping onto a picture, is it's slick and it wants to slide around. So if you're really super perfectionist, stamping directly on a photo may not always be your best bet because it is so slippery. Anyway, then we could do it two ways. We could just let that dry. We can dry that, or we can add a little bit of powder. I want to add a little bit of powder, and I'm looking around for my little paper that I had. I don't see it, so we'll use a different piece of paper. It's okay. I always put a piece of paper under when I'm going to do something like that, and if I have... Oh, you know what? That's just from the lid. Okay. And then keep in mind with the embossing powder, you want everything really clean and really dry. You do not want stuff that, you know, it will get stuck to anything, a wet fingerprint, anything. So that looks good. And I'm just going to repeat that process of gently heating the photo, getting that powder set. And then I'm ready to put some stuff back in my scrapbook. So when I have a couple things finished, I will set them back in the book. Now, the easiest thing to do, of course, if your desk allows it, is to work next to the scrapbook. So have an area there and then work next to it. That's obviously the easiest because you can keep referring to it. If, however, that's not your setup, no worries whatsoever, because all you have to do is just close the book, then reopen the book when you're ready. So I have got my little journaling tag here. I love this little trailer stamp. I cannot wait to do more with it. I'm just gonna slide that guy right in there. So this is still open. I'll just have to think about whether I want something decorative, whether I have more stories to type out and tell. I'm thinking about typing on this one, and that's a placeholder as well. That's not necessarily what I want to have there. Over on this side, we added our camp out there, and then I've got my Fire Family Stars Laughing, Taking Time over here, loving that. I like it simple. We can add washi tape, we can add stickers, and those are things I'll come back through and add as well. On this page, we've got, oh wait, no, that's right, that's not an open spot, that's where this photo goes. Never mind, this page is full. Over on this page, I've got my spot right here and on the pocket pages, they all slide in on one side. So I'm just going to go ahead and slide this in because I'm not sure what I want to say on there yet. So we've got that, and then right here is where our little puppy picture goes. And that can slide right in there. So easy, so simple. You can work in batches, lots. You can work just one. I'm going to be sharing more videos with scrapbooking tips and tricks, as well as you'll be seeing more from this album in future. If you have any questions, suggestions, requests, anything whatsoever, feel free to shoot me an email or just leave me a comment on YouTube. I hope you have enjoyed this little video. I know these camping stamps from Sweet Stamp Shop, I am so excited to have these and work with these even more. I know you're going to be seeing them in the future from me here. All right, that's it from me for today. Have a wonderful crafty day.